Joining me live now is Professor Joseph Siracusa, Dean of Global Futures at Curtin University. Joe, thank you for your time. With these developments, the Wagner Group, they're threatening to make their way over to Moscow now. What do you believe will eventuate in the next 24 to 48 hours?
Good afternoon. Well, there's not much in my life that surprises me. I've been around for the whole Cold War and the post-Cold War. This surprised me. What we have here is a major component of the Russian fighting machine in Ukraine, which has turned about and is now marching to Moscow, and it's moved into the area outside of Ukraine to the main fortress or the main base that supplies the war, and not a shot was fired. So what we're looking at here is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. You know, we got Julius Caesar is under attack, and I'm just sort of knocked over by President Putin's response. You know, the classic lines: "You've stabbed me in the back, and nobody will be unpunished." This is straight out of Stalin's playbook, as a matter of fact, and he's taking it very seriously. Look, there's going to be a lot of problems here. You know, there is a reason why the atomic clock is 90 seconds to midnight. And there'll be people in the West, and I'm talking about the Poles and the Balts and the others, who are dying to get into Ukraine with ground troops, dying to put in those F-16s, and they're dying to bring Ukraine into NATO. They're going to say that this is our moment. There's probably a 48, 72-hour window. Keep in mind, you know, look at it, America had a Chinese balloon over America, and the leadership melted. I mean, Putin's either going to be stronger when this is over, or he's going to be gone from the scene. But I believe that in the West, there'll be enormous pressure to take advantage of this opening. And I think this is, I've seen this, of course, at the end of the Cold War. We had tanks in Moscow and came out in Boris Yeltsin's favor. But these are very serious players. And this guy who runs the Wagner Group, he's not a very pleasant character, as a matter of fact. You know, he wasn't trained in the niceties of officers' school or anything. He's on the march. He has the loyalty of thousands and thousands of people. He says he was double-crossed and his men were killed in Ukraine through the ignorance of the Russian defense minister, and he's gone after him. And of course, what really troubles me is a lot of these guys look like criminal elements. And so now we have criminal elements who are going to go toe-to-toe with the legitimate head of Russia right now. So we got criminal elements, we got former military people, and we got a war in the rearview mirror. And of course, he said that the war was illegitimate, that these people were trying to enrich themselves. So he's created another narrative. But I would say, if I were a NATO advisor or a NATO commander, I would have my bags packed, because I think we're going to have enormous pressure within 48 hours to do something, because there's just too much pressure not to do something. And so now, Biden is going to have to fight this and that kind of thing. Go ahead.
Now, speaking of Biden, we're going to go to Trump for a second. Trump told Sean Hannity on Fox about a fortnight ago that if he was president, he would be able to end this war in less than 24 hours. So why can't Biden do this? What's going on? Is this a proxy war? Like, this goes a long way back now, with Trump making such a statement.
Yes. Look, there's no doubt about this. This is a proxy war, you know, and I don't want to sugarcoat this. The United States is already at war with Russia, but it's not fooling anybody. And what President Trump meant was he'd stop the war tomorrow because he would withdraw American military support. He would withdraw NATO support. And without this support, because Ukraine manufactures nothing, the war would end on Monday morning. He knows that. That's what he means by stopping the war. Just stop supporting Ukraine and try to get to a ceasefire table or something like that. Now, Joe Biden has enormous respect for those nuclear missiles in Belarus and in Russia itself. He doesn't want to start World War III. But you know, isn't this quite an opportunity? You know, if Putin was goaded into using tactical nuclear weapons now, he would distract from everything, and you know, the world would have to look in a different direction. But look, President Putin is under attack. This guy who's coming after him is a serious player. He knows Putin well. He knows his limitations. Putin has already identified him as a criminal who will be dealt with and a traitor. So, you know, we got all the languages in place, and every war council in NATO and America. And keep in mind, before it was called the Department of Defense in Washington, it was the Department of War. And so these people sit around looking for openings. And what greater opening for the United States planners or the NATO planners right now than a possible civil war in Russia? They see their opportunity, and I'll tell you what, it's going to take all their restraint or all their muscle power not to get involved in this. There's going to be enormous pressure to get involved.
Now, you're talking about a civil war. If this does eventuate, when do you see it ending?
Oh, it would take a couple of years. I mean, Russia's a big place. It's 11 time zones. It goes from the middle of Europe to Siberia and the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it would take a long time to fall out and things like that. I don't know what's in the background there, or who's ready to compete with Putin. The same thing. She has the same thing too. There are factional elements everywhere. When you're an authoritarian power, you can be done over by the guys behind you tomorrow. They're not worried about the people. People they can beat down and beat up. They're worried about the army and the military people on their left and on their right. So this is what he worries about. Yes, it would be a very prolonged civil war. And of course, who's in charge of the button? People would say, gee, my goodness, they have all these nuclear weapons, and they have over 4,500 of the strategic kind, not to mention the tactical kind. So, that would be very, very worrying about who might use one of these things. And now anything that untoward happens, if there's a tactical nuclear launch or there's something terrible happens, like somebody bombs Siracusa, the nuclear power plant, even if it's the Wagner Group itself, then they could blame it on somebody else. So, right now we got the opening is there for all kinds of action, all kinds of mischief, and all kinds of problems. So I'd say that the Western planners, including Australian thinkers, are going to be up all night figuring this one out. And I'll tell you what, as they say in the old movies, tighten your seatbelt because we're in for a bumpy ride.
Now, I want to talk about something that hasn't really been spoken about much, Rusophobia. There are over 100,000 Russians living in Australia. Many of them are actually Australian citizens. And I personally know that they're not feeling very good about this. No one's condoning a war. No one in their right mind would condone a war. But they've thrown Russian vodka down the drains. I know of a Russian restaurant in Sydney that's closed its doors in fear of being attacked. There's Australian-Russian children being bullied at school. What do you say to all this?
Well, I'd say to them, your adopted country is Australia, to which you've taken the oath and loyalty and all the rest of it. This would be their ignorant neighbors who are bullying them or accusing them of things. I mean, they're worried. This is fear. Same fear that Japanese or Germans might have had in America or Australia before World War II or after World War II started. That kind of thing. It's the ignorance of their neighbors. These people, by themselves have nothing. They don't pose a threat to Australia. And they are very worried because they see this Rusophobia. And of course, we have a number of people who are on Russia's blacklist, even though don't have an agenda against Russia. Look, these people have done nothing wrong, and Australians who would harass them would be bloody ashamed of themselves. They should be anyway.
Yes, I agree. Professor, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure speaking to you. You're one of my favourites.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Joseph, thank you.